Well, the dream came to an end last night for Pitt volleyball. Panthers fall in the Final Four to Nebraska. No shame in losing to the Cornhuskers. They're number one team in the country for a reason. Disappointing end of the season, but it's hard to take anything away from the season that Pitt had. They were one of the best teams in the country. It was a great season for what has become the Pitt Athletic Department's most successful program. This is our mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt, but how can we not talk about Pitt volleyball? Major kudos to Dan Fisher. Major kudos to those players, those student athletes, because they had an incredible season and one to be proud of. Third straight trip to the Final Four. They get bounced again against a team that you just couldn't make mistakes against because they made very, very few themselves, and Pitt seemed to make even more than usual. The rotation error or whatever it was at the end, and then going out on a net violation that, according to the announcers at least, who certainly were in no way in the pocket for Pitt, shouldn't have been called and should have been overturned on challenge. It ends up being the match point, but it was a moot point at that point because Pitt was losing and they were going to lose to Nebraska. Even if they somehow came back and won that third set, it's highly unlikely they would pull off the reverse sweep like they did against Louisville. Nevertheless, there's no shame in losing to Nebraska. There's no shame in making the Final Four. Half the teams that make the Final Four don't make it further to the national championship game, right? I mean, that's easy math to do on that one. A great season for Dan Fisher once again. A great team for Dan Fisher once again. A great performance for those women, those student athletes, those players once again. And they are the most successful program in Pitt athletics. They're probably the most exciting program in Pitt athletics. They've got some outstanding young players. You feel bad for the seniors who see their careers come to an end that way. But they've got some outstanding young players who are going to be back. And, I mean, I don't think any of us is betting against Pitt making the Final Four again. Could they do it 4 years in a row? That would be a heck of an accomplishment. But I'm not going to bet against it. Not with what Dan Fisher has done so far. Not what those student athletes did, those players did this season. I'm not going to bet against anything. And one of these years, if everything stays on the track it's on, and it certainly looks like it is, they'll break through. And they'll get to the national championship game. In the meantime, they'll just have to settle for being the most successful program in Pitt athletics because that's what they are right now. All right. Major kudos to the volleyball team. We had to start with that, the shout out after the loss to Nebraska last night. Well, let's move on to the Morning Pitt Mailbag. We got a lot of great questions, a lot of stuff about transfers, a lot of stuff about the offense, a lot of stuff about the future, particularly for Pitt football. And we'll talk about it all right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. A little bit longer opening than we typically have there, but I couldn't wait until halfway through or the very tail end to throw in something at the end. Hey, by the way, shout out to Pitt volleyball. I mean, they deserve top billing, and they got top billing here. And most of the questions that we have today are not about volleyball. And so I said, you know what? You guys don't want to ask about volleyball. That's fine. I don't know what you could ask that I would be able to answer, given my limited knowledge of the sport. But I can tell you right off the bat that they had a great season. And the success is through off the charts, and something that Pitt is and should be celebrating. But, of course, we got a lot of other questions as well. A lot of football stuff that we got to talk about here today. Transfers, coaches, recruiting, all that kind of thing right here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do? Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content, whether it's these Morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. It's our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. Or post-game shows or post-game press conferences or live, whatever it is. We got a lot of video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You won't miss any of it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button. It's right down there. You can see it. You see the yellow .com down there. It's right in there. Click subscribe. We appreciate it if you could do that. And, of course, head over and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all of your Pitt sports coverage. All right, let's jump into the jump into the questions. I don't want to waste too much time here. I want to get going with this week's questions. Ray H2P asks, in regards to our recruiting class, do you see everyone signing, or could there be a couple who flip? Also, are there any possible flips in Pitt's direction? It's a great question with signing day coming up just a few days away. It's next Wednesday. It's coming up very fast. It's time for, like, Jim and I to start working on our pre-signing day coverage. I've got a very busy weekend lined up already, but at some point in there, I'm gonna have to fit in some advanced work on signing day coverage, because we're gonna have a ton of stuff for you on Wednesday. So that's coming up soon. But as far as this current recruiting class, we got 20 commitments that we list for Pitt right now. And honestly, I mean, the only one that I'm really, look, anybody can flip at any time. School comes in late. They need to add this. They need to add that. You could lose this guy or lose that guy. The one guy that we're really sort of focused on is Jeremiah Marcelin, the linebacker from Florida. Just sort of keeping an eye on him. We've been keeping an eye on him since he committed. Just sort of felt like he would be a guy you'd have to watch all the way up until signing day. I don't think he's taking any extra official visits. He took official visits to Louisville and Maryland over the summer. Seems like Louisville might be the main challenge, but the last time he commented to me on the subject, or answered my question on the subject, he said he was solid with Pitt and he was signing with Pitt and enrolling in January on top of that. So that's where I think he's at, but I think he's one that we're going to keep an eye on over the next 4 or 5 days to see where he actually ends up signing. Are there any possible flips in Pitt's direction? Nothing jumps out right now. Maybe they'll get one, but I'm my thought right now, my guess is that what you'll see, maybe one other high school addition to the class. I think the focus right now is almost entirely on transfers. I think they're probably kicking the tires on a couple high school guys, but I think the primary focus is getting transfers and getting a bunch of them. They've got 2 committed already, and I think they want to get close to about 10, which is probably where we expect them to end up. I think that's where the real efforts are. The real focus is keeping the recruiting class together and then going out and trying to get transfers to fill out the roster. Pitt is at 17 says, have you been hearing any rumblings on potential scholarship casualties that are currently on the roster, assuming there would be more due to the numbers game? Yeah, I mean, there'll need to be. I think, so doing my calculations where I remove all the super seniors and then the transfers and then Bub Means and Mackin Salves and MJ Devonshire, they're currently projected at about 59 guys coming back on the scholarship roster, unless I'm missing one. You add in 20 recruits and you're at 79. You add in 2 transfers. Oh, I guess actually, so I need to update my numbers here. I've had these numbers working for a while, but that just still includes Brandon George and Nate Temple. So I'm going to add 2 back in with George and Temple, and that turns into 61 returning guys. You add the 20 commitments for the class, you're up to 81. If both transfers, obviously Tamon Lynham for the cornerback from Nebraska, and then Upa, the long snapper from UConn, if they're both on scholarship, and I assume they both would be, I don't know, that would be my assumption, that's going to put you at about 83. And so right now you've only got room to add 2 more players. Now I think they'll get more than 2 transfers out of this weekend alone. So there is going to be more attrition. I don't know if I need to sit here and speculate, but you look down the list of the guys who've gone into the portal already, the Addison Copeland, the Trey Anderson, the Buddy Mack, the Aiden Henningham. I mean, there are guys who are very clearly not playing. And so I think you look for those guys and you can probably find likely candidates. And, my guess, we'll see some go in the next couple weeks before I think the portal closes on January 2nd, and then you'll see more go after spring camp. Eventually, the numbers will all work out, but that's sort of where they stand now. Specific guys, I couldn't tell you specific guys, but I think we can all look at the roster and the scholarship board and probably make some pretty educated guesses. Pitt Panther 21 says, in regards to reporting on the recent OC search and a glimpse into the world of journalism, how many things did you hear during the search that turned out to be totally false? Were there any names or rumors you heard from trustworthy sources during the process that ended up not being true at all? How many sources do you usually verify with before posting information on this board? There's a lot of good questions. I'll start with the last one first. How many sources do you verify with before posting information on this board? I would say a couple things on that topic. One, not all sources are created the same. Source A and source B are not the same. And if I hear something from source A, that's going to weigh differently than if I hear it from source B. Now, if I hear it from both, well, that would be better than just hearing it from one. But source A might be a strong enough source, and I might be confident enough in that information that I might do something with it. Whereas source B, I might say, okay, I think you're usually right about things, but I'm going to need to look into it a little bit more. Now, of course, where things get really tricky in any situation like this is, you want to get multiple sources confirmation. You want to get 2 sources. You want to get 3 sources, whatever. You want to get as many confirmations as you can. What you always have to be aware of and sort of watching out for is, okay, so I just heard this thing from source A, source B, and source C, right? I have to watch out and make sure that source A and source B didn't both hear it from the same place. And there's only so many different places it can come from. But if source 1 behind source A and source B has bad information, I didn't really hear it from 2 places. I really only heard it from one, and that's a bad place. And sometimes they'll run into a situation where I might tell someone a piece of information, and then, say I tell source D a piece of information, and then all of a sudden I get a call from source B. Well, did source B actually hear it from somewhere? Did source B hear it from source D, who heard it from me in the first place? So you do sort of analyze sources, and I mean, it's like I don't know if I'm making it sound more interesting than it is, but you do have to you do put some thought into it. Now, we're in a unique situation here with Panther-Lair.com, because to me there's different things. There's an article I put on the front page of the site, and then a post that I put on the message board, and a lot of times the two overlap. If I put a big recruiting rundown, a recruiting update on the message boards, I'll link that on the front page of the site. But sometimes I might have something that I'm not 100% sure of. I'm pretty sure of. I just kind of need to get a little bit more confirmation before we move forward to actually putting an article up. And so I'll put it on the message board. I feel like the board gives us sort of a midway point between, I'm hearing a pretty strong rumor, and here's this confirmed thing I can put an article about on the front page. So we're sort of fortunate there. And so how many sources do I verify with before posting information on the board? It depends on the source that I'm talking to, and it depends on how solid I feel like the information is. The bar is lower on the message board because of the sort of the nature of the board. During this search, how many things did I hear that turned out to be totally false? Not much. Not much. I feel like it was all pretty. I feel like I had people who, I feel like I was talking to people who had a pretty good idea of what was going on. And so I didn't really feel like I got too much bad information along the way. But, these are good questions. I appreciate it. Atwood409 says, so your plan about young transfers to build the roster probably is going to be struck down. So what's your backup plan? Yeah, I guess what it was a court case that said the NCAA can't restrict multi-time transfers from playing right away. They can't make a rule that says you can only transfer once and play right away, and that if you transfer a second time or a third time or whatever, you have to sit out for a year. Said you can't make them sit out for a year. Now, that might ultimately get struck down or overturned, but for now, it's not. And yeah, that stings, because we felt like you were in a good spot if you could get young transfers. If you could get Kanate Mumfield as a sophomore, or Donovan McMillan as a redshirt sophomore. You get guys like that, young transfers. Christian Bayer fits the mold as well as a redshirt sophomore. quarterback. You get guys who are going to, who are going to transfer in and then be here for 2 or 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is. They've got the defensive end from Clemson, David Ojebwe, visiting this weekend. He's a redshirt freshman. He's going to have 4 years of eligibility wherever he goes to college for his next stop. And I said that's the way to go, because once you get these guys, you get these young players to transfer, and it's their first transfer, they can't transfer again without sitting out a year. I said that's the move. That's what you need to do, is go get those younger transfers. Well, if they change that rule and now guys can transfer as many times as they want and play right away, now you lose a little bit of that hold that you thought you were going to have. What's my backup plan? I don't know. Like, ultimately, as much as we talk about transfers and as much as I talk about transfers, and we'll keep a lot of focus on transfers, I mean, a program like Pitt and most programs are still going to build a majority of their roster out of high school recruiting. You're still going to get a majority of your guys out of high school. You're still going to recruit those guys and evaluate those guys and develop those guys. That's still going to be the basis of it. And then you're going to look to fill in the spots where you need to fill in out of the portal. That's always, I think, going to be the case. And so the backup plan is keep recruiting well out of high school, keep evaluating well, and hope you can do what needs to be done to keep those guys here. Spenges says, Narduzzi picking Bell further dispels the myth of Pat Narduzzi only winning ground and pound OCs, but how would you grade his prior choices based on their pre-Pitt resumes and performance with their Pitt rosters? Jim Chaney, Matt Canada, Sean Watson, Mark Whipple, Frank Signetti. I don't know. Like, how would I grade those guys based on their resumes and then how they did at Pitt? I mean, Whipple and Canada obviously both had one season each where they set records at Pitt. Whipple's record-setting season was even better than Canada's record-setting season in terms of the numbers and that it put up, the records that it broke, in terms of the individual performances, particularly Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison, and in terms of the team success, where they win 11 games and win the ACC. So you grade Whipple pretty high, and probably at the top just based on that level of success. And I'm not sure who you would put above Whipple, even though his first 2 years weren't great. I mean, 2019 was really bad. 2020 was an improvement, but Kenny Pickett got hurt, and that kind of slowed things down and made things difficult. But 2021 was better than – it was the best – I mean, obviously, it was the best season of Pat Narduzzi's time at Pitt, and it was the best offensive season of Pat Narduzzi's time at Pitt. And so you put that one number one in terms of evaluating a season, and I think by extension you put Mark Whipple number one. Resume-wise, I mean, he had been a head coach. He had been, play caller in the NFL, play caller, quarterbacks coach in the NFL, play caller in college. I mean, Whipple had the resume. I think Jim Chaney's resume was good coming out of the SEC. Sean Watson had a pretty solid resume, at least with, working with Teddy Bridgewater. That was, kind of the biggest, notch on his belt, the biggest gold star on his resume. Frank Signetti had a good year in 2009. And Matt Canada, I mean, had been around for a while, and with moderate levels of success, and then struck gold, in 2016. So what was your question, Smedges? How would I rank these guys? How would I grade them? I mean, I think Chaney was a good hire. I think Canada was a good hire. I think Watson, he could have done better there. He probably could have done better than Whipple if he was looking for a pass, happy coordinator who could help develop Kenny Pickett and develop the passing game. He could have done better than Whipple, although that obviously worked out great. And then obviously I think he could have done better than Frank Signetti. I know I just said that I would probably rank Whipple as the best coordinator of the Narduzzi era because of what happened in 2021, and I just said that he probably could have done better. But I think at the time when Whipple was getting hired, he probably could have found another, offensive coordinator who could help Pitt develop a passing game and help develop Kenny Pickett, and probably do it a little bit better with a little more balance than what Mark Whipple had. I mean, his whole time at Pitt, on the balance front, and, probably could have done a little bit better than Whipple did in 2019. So, grading the hires, at the time they were hired, I mean, I think Cheney, Canada, pretty good. Watson, Whipple, Signetti probably could have done better. We'll find out about Bell. I got one or two more questions here. Actually, Pitman 2003 wants to know, how would you grade the hire of Cade Bell on a letter scale? It's interesting. When you grade something, I mean, you're grading against the right answer, right? If you're going to grade a test, you get an A if you get all the answers right. You get an F if you get all the answers wrong. You get a C if you get half of them right or half of them wrong, right? I mean, more or less. I don't know. I haven't been in school in a long time. So it's a question of what is the right answer? You know what I mean? What was the right answer at offensive coordinator? And as somebody else in the mailbag questions made a joke about, Pitt fans wanted a young, exciting, innovative offensive coordinator who also has 20 years of FBS experience. So yeah, that feels about right. That we're not, trying to have everything in one guy. But I think when you look at Cade Bell, and I talked a lot about this during the live show on Wednesday night, I think it's notable to me because Pat Narduzzi went outside what we have perceived to be his comfort zone for the last 9 years. This guy is not like the previous 5 offensive coordinators. And those guys were all different too. Jim Chaney, Matt Canada, Deshaun Watson, Mark Whipple, Frank Cinetti. 5 very different coordinators, 5 very different coaches. But Bell is different from all of them. And different in significant ways that feel like a big departure for Narduzzi, in ways that feel like I say, like him going outside of his comfort zone, looking for real change and significant change in the offense. And so by that measure of Narduzzi seemingly identifying offense as an issue and really trying to shake it up, I give it a pretty high grade. Because I think he hired someone who, by all appearances, will shake it up. And we'll see how it all works once he gets on the field and starts calling plays. But you just as a hire, I mean, I think he found someone who should be able to add some new energy into the offense. And so I think you grade that one pretty high. I think if you wanted Narduzzi to go out and get someone who's got a proven track record of productive offenses in college football, I think it grades pretty high there as well. Now, granted, it's FCS, not FBS, but I still think it grades pretty high and does pretty well because Western Carolina scored a ton of points. You know what I mean? They were really, really productive with Cade Bell calling the plays. And so I think that grades pretty high. Could he have had more experience at the FBS level? Sure. Could he, Pitt fans are picking apart like how much he scored against this team, how much he scored against that team. Did he just juice all the points in one, in a handful of games and that's why they scored? I don't know. But they averaged a ton of points and they averaged a ton of yards per game. And they had some really productive players. A couple of them are visiting Pitt this weekend. And so I tend to grade this hire pretty favorably. I don't know what letter I would put on it. B, B+, A minus, B minus. I don't know. Probably in the B to high B range, with the lone exception just being the lack of experience at the FBS level. But even that doesn't need to be something that holds him back. And to me, that's almost sort of overshadowed by how far Narduzzi went out of his, outside his comfort zone to make this hire. So, on the surface, I like it. I think there's a lot to like about it. I think it's looking at a guy who seems to have an idea of how to score points in college football in 2023 and 2024, which is what Pitt has needed. Well, seems like they got it, or at least they got a guy who fits the mold of the kind of coach who would be able to do that. So I like it. I give it a pretty favorable grade, like I said, but we'll all find out in like 9 months, right? 9.5 months, somewhere around there, 8.5 months. Do the math. You can do the math yourself. We got a lot more questions. We didn't really get a chance to get to them as we close in on the 25-minute mark, so I'm going to try and save those. I think I actually had questions left over from last week. So maybe on next week's mailbag, we'll have to try to get collect a lot from not just this week's leftover questions, but last week's leftover questions. So, because we really do appreciate everybody who submits questions for the mailbag every week on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. Every week we put out a call for mailbag questions, and, you guys come through. So we really appreciate it. Thanks for all the questions this week. And, of course, thanks for watching the videos this week as well. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And check out the website. We'll have a lot of coverage from the official visit weekend coming up here from today through Sunday. I think they'll get a bunch of transfers out of this one, and we'll see what other surprises might be in store. So thanks again for checking out the video today, and thanks for submitting the questions. Thanks for watching the videos all week. We appreciate it. So like and subscribe, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday with the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.